Shabbat Shalom. We read in the prophet Yirmiyahu, the prophet Jeremiah, Kol Mar Hashem, Kol Barama Nishma, Nihi Bichi Tumurim. Thus said the Eternal, a cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. Thus says the Eternal, a cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. We continue this week in Shiva for Eden Yerushalmi, Ori Danino, Alex Labanoff, Carmel Gott, Almog Sarusi, and Hirsch Goldberg-Polins. I'm sure for many of us, if we just said the name Hirsch, we would know exactly who we were talking about. Not true a year ago, but since October 7th, Hirsch's parents, Rachel Goldberg and John Polin, have done what I would call a miraculous job of getting word out about the plight of the hostages. Last Shabbos, we had a beautiful Shabbos. Saturday night, I turned on my phone to the news, of course, of the 6 hostages who were found, and among them was Hirsch Goldberg-Polins. It feels like yet another hit after a very difficult year. And I'll be honest here, we are in the midst of Elul. This is the season in which we're supposed to really do a cheshbon nefesh, to really search our souls as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Who are we and who do we need to be? And as I go through my own cheshbon nefesh, I find an incredible amount of sadness, a little bit of fear and anxiety. But even more than sadness, and certainly more than fear, there's anger. I'm carrying around a lot of anger over what's happened in this last year. What our friends, what our family in Israel are going through, the anti-Semitism here in America, and the profound sense of injustice that I'm carrying with me as I look at all aspects of this world, this profound sense of injustice. And I'm angry. I'm angry about it. And in the midst of all that, I keep coming back now to the words of Hirsch's mom, Rachel, who through tears has kept us going these last 10 months, and who in a eulogy for her son was somehow able to summon the strength to be a modern-day prophet, and to remind us that as we prepare for this new year, what we need perhaps most of all is faith and resilience. Now, just out of curiosity, how many of you have either watched Hirsch's funeral or read the eulogies? Nearly everybody. Pretty amazing. Faith and resilience are what we need to carry us into this new year. And I was thinking about Rachel, because after all, as Jeremiah tells us, thus said the Eternal, a cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. Who is this Rachel to whom Jeremiah is referring? Of course, not directly Rachel Goldberg, but the biblical Rachel. What do we know about the biblical Rachel? We know from a beautiful midrash from Rabbi that Rachel was entirely giving of herself. And as she fell in love with Jacob, she nevertheless understood that her sister Leah needed some respect and dignity, And so Rachel actually sacrificed some of her own well-being, some of her own respect and dignity so that her sister Leah could be elevated as well. And in the Midrash, Rachel is an incredible hero among our people because she saw not just what she needed, but what others needed, and was willing to sacrifice some of herself for the benefit of others. Now we read something else interesting about Rachel actually at the end of her life. She goes through a terrible delivery for her last child. And as the child comes out and Rachel is actually dying because of this delivery, Rachel decides she's going to name this child. And she names the child Benoni, the son of my suffering. And Jacob swoops in, her husband swoops in and renames the child. What does Jacob name this child? Benjamin, the son of my strength. The son of my strength. How could it be his wife is dying here on her deathbed and he comes in and renames the child Benjamin, the son of my strength? And our rabbis come to tell us in a beautiful midrash on the verse in which Rachel dies and she's buried near Ephrat on the way to Bethlehem. It says, why did Jacob choose to bury her there rather than take her to the cave of Machpelah? Right, the cave of Machpelah is where Abraham and Sarah are buried. The cave of Machpelah in Hebron, that's where Isaac and Rebekah are buried. The cave of Machpelah, that's where Jacob will be buried and Leah is eventually buried. But when Rachel dies, Genesis tells us that Jacob buried her near the side of a road and set up a little headstone for her there, near Ephrat on the way to Bethlehem. And the rabbis tell us, why did Jacob do this? Because Jacob saw in a dream, he received a prophecy that one day the Israelites would be exiled from the land of Israel. And on their way out of town, they would pass by the tomb of Rachel. And Rachel would be weeping for all of these children who were being exiled from their land. Rachel would be weeping for all of her children who are suffering. And indeed, this gives us the quotation. Thus said the Lord, a cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. What we begin to see through Jacob's prophecy that's revealed in Genesis and then forward is the power of a mother's tears. The power of a mother's tears. We see it planted here in the seeds that will eventually become known at the time of the exile of our ancestors to Babylonia. Because here it says, wailing, bitter weeping, a cry is heard in Ramah. Now Ramah, many of us know from Camp Ramah, the word means elevations, it means heights, it means on high. So another way to read this verse in Jeremiah is that a cry is heard on high, that God responds to a mother's tears. Now, when else do we hear about the power of weeping and wailing, the power of crying? In Exodus chapter 2, when it says that God hears the tears of our ancestors as they suffered under slavery, and God responded to their cries and sent Moses as a redeemer and brought our people out of the land of Mitzrayim into their freedom and their promise in the land of Eretz Yisrael. God responds to tears. And I'll note here in this beautiful prophecy in Jeremiah, thus said the Eternal, a cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. And then the prophecy continues, thus said the Eternal, restrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from shedding tears, for there is a reward for your labor, declares the Eternal. Your children shall return from the enemy's land, and there is hope for your future, declares the Eternal. Your children shall return to their country. My hope, my prayer is in this moment of incredible sadness, because of the success of Rachel and John and making the plight of the hostages and especially their son Hirsch known to the world, that maybe we are at a turning point in this war. Maybe we are at a turning point in history. Maybe we are at a turning point in the anti-Semitism that we're suffering here in America. Because if we can follow Rachel and John's lead and turn our sadness and our fear and our anger into the incredible faith and resilience that they have shown since October 7th, the incredible faith and resilience that they demonstrated at the funeral for their son, then maybe things can change. Now, there's no question that Israel right now is going through its own turmoil and trying to figure out its own identity. It is Elul, after all, and Israel is going through its own cheshbon hanefesh with regard to the emphasis we put on protecting the lives of those who've been taken hostage and the need to destroy the lives of our enemies. That's their battle. That's their cheshbon hanefesh that they're working out now. We here in America have to find our role. We have to find our voice. Because where we are right now cannot sustain. At least where I am right now, can't sustain. So how do we follow the faith and the resilience of Rachel and John as they mourn for their beloved Hirsch, for our beloved Hirsch? Thus said the Eternal, once you have shed your tears, restrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from shedding tears, for there is a reward for your labor, declares the Eternal. V'shavu me'eretz oyev, they shall return from the enemy's land. V'yesh tikva. Yesh tikva. There is hope for your future, declares the Eternal. Your children shall return to their country. God hears Rachel's tears, and God responds by promising us a return. God encourages us by telling us to hope. As we continue forward in these days of Elul, in this time of cheshbon hanefesh, we continue to wrestle with what we can do to help support our brothers and sisters in Israel. We continue to ask how we can combat anti-Semitism here at home. And I think just as 2 weeks ago, in the midst of Shiva for Congregational President I. Matthew Miller, we reminded ourselves that one of the ways we get through the challenges of our lives is to find strength in community. And I think this week we remind ourselves one of the ways we overcome the tsuris, the hatred, the injustice of our world, is through faith and resilience. That's what Rachel teaches us. That's why Rachel cried. And that's why God promised Rachel, Yesh tikva, there is hope. This Shabbat of Parashat Shoftim, this Shabbat of Elul, this Shabbat in which we continue in Shiva for Hirsch, Goldberg-Polins, and the other 5 hostages. May God bless each and every one of us with the knowledge that there is support in community. May God bless each and every one of us with hope. May God bless each and every one of us with faith and resilience. And through all those things, may God bless us and Israel and the entire Jewish people with peace. And let us say together, Amen.